สวัสดีครับ I'm Point from ค้นพบ What is karma? Now this is a topic that I've been meaning to talk about for a long time now, but I wanted to first articulate it in a right manner so that I could deliver the topic in the right context. So first of all, we've all heard the word karma, obviously. And I want you to first of all appreciate that people understand karma in very different ways. People understand karma in very different ways. So I want you to recognize in yourself, how do you understand or know karma? Do you hold it as a belief system, for example, or do you understand karma as a direct result of your own evaluation of it, contemplation of it, or realization of it, or insight of it? Because there's a big difference there. You want to first know how you hold on to the idea or concept of karma. Do you hold it purely as a belief? For example, one popular belief in popular culture is to assume that karma is some sort of universal mechanism where the sum total of your actions and deeds, intentions, actions, and deed, good and bad, they all get equalized and accounted for eventually, so there's no escaping it, right? So if you were to go and murder somebody today, if you were to go and rob and steal and cheat from somebody today, right, then somehow in the future, whether in this lifetime or the next lifetimes, if that thing exists, then that would come back to you in some way, shape, or form, and you will have to pay for the consequences in some way, shape, or form. That's one belief of it, right, that I'm sure we are all quite familiar with. Or you can perhaps think about karma as simply what the word means, action. Karma means action, it is cause and effect. Okay, seems like that makes sense. But first of all, recognize how you think about and understand karma. Where does it end between your direct understanding of it in your direct experience, and where does it begin in terms of holding on to karma as a belief? That's very important, right? Because if we listen to what the wise teachers, the wise masters, the gurus, the sages, the monks, or anything for that matter, how they talk about it, we'll recognize that this issue goes on a very deep level. It's very profound. What karma actually is very, very profound. And from my understanding of it, which I want to share in today's video, is that to truly understand karma on the deepest level requires getting to a level of conscious awareness and developing insight from that. Of course, I have not reached there myself, but nonetheless, it does not mean that we cannot understand karma in a more practical way, where we can begin to apply that in our daily life and in our life circumstances. So think of this video as a practical way of getting introduced to karma and understanding what karma is. So I want to borrow an explanation which I learned from my meditation teacher, which I felt makes a lot of sense and that you can prove to yourself in your direct experience. Now, I'm going to change the examples from the ones that he gave for the purpose of this video, but I try my best to contain the meaning and the message in accordance to what he was trying to explain or give an explanation for. Let's say that you did something that hurt somebody else. Let's say it was an accident. Let's say you caused an accident and this caused physical injury to somebody else. Okay. How does karma work in that sense? So first of all, the person who was hurt, of course we can say that in that situation or that circumstance, he or she was not at fault, correct? He or she did not do anything to deserve that injury or harm as a result of the accident which you caused. But karma for that individual would play out like this. That person would still likely suffer because of the pain that was caused by the accident, correct? That person would suffer because of the pain that was caused by the accident. So you can see that that person's karma or suffering is a result of his or her own attachment to their body, to their physical body. Now you might be able to agree with it on some intellectual level, but it just seems so unfair. They didn't do anything to deserve this. How come they still have to pay the price of karma? Because the fact of the matter is very much likely the case that that person would still suffer the consequences that he or she was not responsible for. Yet they still experience suffering because their karma comes from their attachment to their physical body. It might sound like a difficult grain of truth to accept at first, but if you really give it thought, you can't deny the fact that it makes some sense, right? On some level. Now, for the person who caused the accident, how does karma work? Interesting, right? Let's say in the first scenario, that accident was completely unintended. That's what we call an accident. The person, or you, did not intend to cause a car accident, for example, and hurt somebody else. Your karma, in that case, could manifest as a feeling of guilt, shame, etc., which could produce your suffering. Because you might say to yourself and keep repeating yourself, oh, how could this happen? My own negligence, my own carelessness had caused somebody to go through such physical pain. And now we don't know if he or she will be handicapped for life as a result of my own carelessness behind the steering wheel, for example. Right? So you also suffer in that sense because of the immense sense of guilt which you now have to face and which you have to find some way to evolve through or to transcend. Find some way to atone for the mistake per se, or find some way to forgive yourself and let go of this sense of guilt which now entraps you. So that's how karma works in that sense. But what if that accident was caused by intention? Let's say you intended to hurt that person because you hate them for some reason. You hate somebody else, so you intended to hurt them, and you succeeded in hurting them. How does karma play out? Because, hey, you might say, that's not fair, because that person didn't have to go to jail, right? It seemed like an accident, so there was no investigation, and that person no longer has to go to jail. How is that fair? I would argue this, that you can prove to yourself through contemplation, through self-reflection, and especially through meditation. Because meditation starts to show to you how your own mind works. And this following explanation, I think, provides a lot of insight into what's going on here, if you could say. You intended to hurt somebody else in this example. How will you pay for this down the road? You got away with it in the short run, so it seems unfair, right? It seems like karma, stupid belief, doesn't exist. Here's what I would argue. Because in this case, you had an intention to hurt somebody, that intention must have been held as a thought pattern in your mind for some time. You had to contemplate on how you're going to execute this accident. You had to think about it. You had to, as the legal terms say, it was premeditated. You thought about it over and over and over again. You thought about hurting another human being over and over and over again. And you might justify to yourself in a number of ways, because again, that's how the ego works. I talk about the ego a lot, right? And the ego is very self-deceptive in nature. It always finds a way to justify to itself even the most horrible actions that it is about to undertake. You might justify to yourself, yeah, I feel completely righteous to hurt that person because he or she cheated from my family. He or she cheated from my girlfriend or boyfriend. Or perhaps he or she stole my girlfriend or my boyfriend. So I hate their guts, I hate them, and this action is justified. So now where's karma? Karma is this. Because you have taken that intention, because of that view of self-justification, you have now compromised something in yourself. You have compromised integrity. You have compromised right action, right view. And when you walk down that path, in order to fool yourself into believing that what you did was justified, you have to keep on finding new reasons to lie to yourself to feel justified in the behavior you just took. This will keep you in suffering because this prevents you from the ability to grow. What does that mean? Because if you were to grow in life, whether you want to call it grow in terms of maturity, in terms of personal development, or in terms of spirituality, whatever you want to call it. But if you were to grow, you would need to eventually come to terms with the action that you took. And that will be very difficult. That day will be very difficult for you because it means accepting how selfish and how wrong your behavior was in that day. And that is not an easy thing to stomach at all. It's a very difficult thing for the ego to go through once it recognizes its own selfishness, its own foolishness, its own darkness, or the monster in itself. To truly come to terms with that is very difficult and demanding, both on an emotional level, on a conceptual level, thinking level, mental level, psychological level, you name it. So because it is very difficult, you will much more likely continue to bullshit yourself and lie to yourself and justify that sort of behavior, which will corrupt you more in some sense. You're not able to return to a place of integrity. You're not able to develop integrity because you're too busy lying to yourself and justifying why that action was correct. So you see how this works? And this sort of behavior will result in this sort of intention and self-justification, self-bullshit, and self-delusion. There we go, that's the word I was looking for. This sort of self-delusion will manifest or translate into more selfish behavior, which will keep you away, or which will reduce the chance of you, which will reduce your chances in being able to develop and cultivate genuine, healthy relationships, which are based on mutual trust, mutual loyalty, mutual respect. Because if you can't even live that and embody that on your own, then how can you expect to develop relationships that are meaningful, right? Because you're kept in judgment, you're kept in anger, revenge, vengeance. And it leads you down a very dark road. In the ultimate sense, you could say there's nothing wrong with that, but this road keeps you longer in suffering, and now you're in a cycle where suffering recreates itself. You see that? Your actions based on harmful intentions, based on, if I may use this word and I use it in a loose context, dangerous thinking, it perpetuates itself. It repeats itself. And the deeper you go on that road, the more difficult it is to get out of that trap. The more difficult it is to come to terms with what you did in order to sort of atone or forgive yourself. Because it's much easier for your ego to keep on deluding yourself and justifying why your action was correct. And you're being driven more into a conflicting way of life. Because on a deeper level of your own being, you now have more and more conflict. You see what I mean? How can you develop genuine relationships somewhere down the road in the future if you did something that you know deep in your heart was not based on the wrong intentions, some dark intention? How can that character develop genuine, healthy, trusting, respecting relationships down the road? Or in any domain of life where you want to pursue. You see? So that is how the cycle starts to perpetuate itself and repeat itself. And so how does this relate to, say, suffering in general? Because it stops your ability to turn inwards and begin a more meaningful and deep process of spirituality, if I may use that word. It is harder for you to contemplate on your own actions, thoughts, behaviors, intentions. It is harder for you to learn to come back to the present moment where peace and joy truly lives and lies, is found. Because again, the ego's self-deception mechanism is in play in order to keep yourself deluded into being justified and saying that what you did was correct. Harming somebody else, hurting somebody else, cheating from somebody else, robbing somebody else from something that was not yours. You have to find a way to bullshit yourself and believe that what you did was correct in some way. And that bullshitting yourself is based on thinking about the past or thinking about the future in a way that keeps this illusion alive. And that makes it more difficult for you to begin the process of learning about your own true nature and learning about what it means to be in the present moment, to transcend suffering. And if you practice some form of contemplation or meditation, you will find very quickly that your thoughts that happen in your monkey mind, they come in the same pattern over and over and over and over again. And if you have disturbing thoughts from disturbing intentions or wrongful intentions, then when you meet these things, it will disturb you and you will suffer and you will run away from it. And yet running away from it makes those thoughts stronger, and it keeps you locked in that level of development for longer than needs be. And that's how suffering continues. it becomes much harder for you to accept and come to terms with what you did. It becomes much more difficult. Now you may say that, well, what about those cases where, like for example, those corrupt politicians who seemingly have such a great lifestyle, luxurious lifestyle, they never have to pay for their sins. Their children and grandchildren are enjoying such a luxurious lifestyle. They never have to pay for their sins. So why don't I just do that? I wouldn't be so quick to judge and make that conclusion. I guarantee you that deep down on the deepest level, they're not happy. And it's very difficult for them to evolve and come to terms with what they had done or what their parents or grandparents had done. Because it's very disturbing for the mind to accept, you see. It's very difficult for you to confront and come to terms with something that you had done in the past that you now regret and recognize as wrong. And once it's difficult to confront that, you're going to want to run away from it, which keeps that very thought pattern even more alive, even more stronger. You see? So in that sense, it's much more effective and much more beneficial to truly avoid these, to truly develop the discipline to not engage in these harmful behaviors and actions in the first place, rather than to do them and then try to, correct them later on down the road. See what I mean? Now, having said that, you might then ask, well, okay, I can sort of see what you're saying here, but I mean, come on, I just still can't quite connect it. It's still unfair. That person hurt me. My ex-girlfriend hurt me. My ex-boyfriend hurt me. My partner cheated on me, and I don't see them paying the consequences for that. They have a new relationship. They have a new boyfriend. They have a new girlfriend. Life's not fair. Again, back to basics. In the beginning of the video, as I said, our own suffering in that sense comes from our own attachments, right? So even though you were wronged in some way, shape, or form, let's say, somebody cheated you in a relationship, somebody cheated you monetarily, financially, okay, anything, whatever. You're suffering because you are attached to your sense of identity. And you need to first recognize how that mechanism is playing out in order to transcend that suffering. Whereas the person who cheated from you, they might look happy in the short run. But I guarantee you that if they cheated on you, then I guarantee you that it will be harder and harder for them to stop this type of behavior. And when they finally have to pay the consequence for that down the road, it'll be a very difficult day for them. Your own viewpoint that this is not fair or unjust or whatever is, in this sense, merely as a result of lacking the perspective to seeing the bigger picture. Because your narrative of suffering, where your mind has a mental story that says, it's still unfair, this whole concept of karma is still unfair because I was cheated on, and that person who cheated on me, they have a new happy relationship now. That's not fair. How is karma fair in that sense? Again, you haven't seen the full movie yet. You haven't seen the full picture yet. For example, somebody who does some behavior or engages in a lot of pleasure, right? A lot of pleasure. It may seem like they're happy in the short run, but you see, the more you engage in that behavior, the more you're literally training your mind and training your brain to keep on seeking that, seeking that, seeking that, seeking that, seeking that, in order to distract yourself from reality or from life. And the pleasure becomes more and more short-lived each and every time, and you become more desperate to get the smallest juices out of it. And you have to engage in more risky behavior to maintain that level of pleasure. Eventually, this is an unsustainable model, and you will have to pay the price later on down the road. So again, the issue why we may be, I understand this, by the way, I understand that it may seem like, how is this fair? How is it fair that somebody who did something wrong seems to be having life play out the way they want? But I guarantee you, if you zoom out and look at the bigger perspective, the rule is fair. The game is fair. The law is fair. They can't escape it. And for that person to walk the spiritual path, or to walk some path of development, whether you want to call it maturity or personal development or anything like that, it becomes much more difficult for them, because they will then have to come to terms with what they did and who they are. And that's very difficult for the ego to stomach and accept. And if you don't accept that, you will run back and engage in the same unhelpful behaviors that keep you trapped in that cycle of unhelpful habits and behaviors. And you continue to cause more suffering for yourself and others around you. And I think this is one way that I would like to present karma, at least from my understanding of it. Again, karma is a very deep thing, and to truly understand on the deepest level requires advanced work on your level of conscious awareness, which of course I'm not there yet myself. But I want to lay this out today because I think understanding karma like this is helpful in the sense of encouraging us to do something right or do something good. Now I use good in quotations. Do something right, do something that is in line with your integrity, for example, from a place of understanding and not from a place of fear, you see? Because if you hold on to this concept as a belief, then essentially what you're saying is you're doing good or bad based on fear of punishment and expectation of reward. You see what I mean? So you want to be able to make some understanding of karma that encourages you to take the right action in a way that you find meaningful, that is based on your own direct understanding, not based on fear of punishment or expectation of reward. You see? So in this sense, he who masters himself is he who is free. The person who masters themselves and comes to terms with who they truly are. That person is said to be on a path towards freedom from suffering, towards peace, happiness, and joyfulness. And I want to present this in today's video. Apologies for the long film today, and it might be jumping back and forth, up and down, but again, this was not an easy topic to contemplate and to deliver. So, but I hope that you were able to find some value out of it. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time. สวัสดีครับ